heartbreaking images of how these once thriving cities and towns have now been reduced to nothing but rubble. But let's focus on India now. Whether you know or not, there are several parts in the country that are actually earthquake prone, that have been identified as seismologists as places where there's a high. First tell you where all. National capital Delhi, it falls under zone 4, which is considered to be a high risk of earthquake of seismic activity. Uttar Pradesh, particularly some parts of UP like North Uttar Pradesh, there's a high risk again. Now in Himachal Pradesh, there is a very high risk. That means it falls under zone 5, which is the most extreme, and which means the risk is very, very real right now. There are many other states and union territories that fall in this category. Parts of Jammu and Kashmir, for example, especially along the Himalayan mountains, there is a very, very real threat of a calamity striking. In Gujarat, particularly the run of Kutch, there is a very high risk. It's part of the zone 5 of seismic activity. Uttarakhand, similarly, also, again, these are parts of Uttarakhand that either fall in the very high or in the high category of earthquake, of such a calamity happening. In Rajasthan too, at this point, the risk has been identified to be in zone 4, like Delhi, like Uttar Pradesh, which means there's a high risk. In parts of Bihar, again, there are some parts where in fact the risk is very high and others where the risk is high. So in all, the state is prone to earthquakes. West Bengal, another state that's been identified as seismologists as having a high risk of having earthquakes. In many parts of the northeast too, you will see that most states are either having a high or a very high risk. Assam, for example, it's in zone 5. That's the highest level of seismic activity. Manipur too falls in that list. So does Nagaland. Now beyond that, in a state like Sikkim, for example, it's in zone 4, which means there's a high risk of seismic activity. Andaman and Nicobar too, there's a very high chance of earthquakes. So you can make out that we've covered a lot of states and union territories right now in the country. In the face of that, how prepared are we for such a calamity, for such a disaster? Remember what happened in Gujarat in 2001 when there was a heartbreaking earthquake that left thousands of people dead. We focus on one particular city in India, on the national capital, on Delhi, where, as I showed you, there's a high risk of earthquakes. What's being done to tackle that? Are we prepared for this kind of a disaster? We tell you in our next report. Houses falling down like a pack of cards. High-rise buildings, iconic monuments all reduced to dust. Is this what will happen to India too if we were hit by an earthquake? No, we're not fear-mongering. There's a very, very real threat of an earthquake striking us here in India. Think of what happened in Bhuj in 2001. This could happen in our cities too. Did you know, for example, that Delhi lies in a high-risk zone, and that's why those of you who live in Delhi every few months feel a tremor or two.
Organization of CDRI, it could have a huge impact, actually, and both internationally and domestically. And this is an Indian-led organization, and India has such a huge capacity. And I think that India can share a lot from that within to the over the world to really change that. And also India, this factor too.
So let's talk about the elephant in the room. How prepared are we if an earthquake hits us tomorrow? As of 2019, the MCD in Delhi confirmed that researchers believe 90% of buildings in Delhi are at high risk. And this is largely due to two factors. First, the capital has a lot of old buildings which are prone to collapse. And second, even new buildings haven't been built to ensure they're quake-proof.
1 out of 10 buildings they see out there, those are fairly new construction, is actually collapsing because implementation was not quite right.
While there are several guidelines to ensure buildings are quake-proof, let's face it, it's never followed, and neither do we, the residents, ask if it is. So if what happened to Turkey happened in the national capital region, can we actually bear the brunt?
हमारा मेन ऑब्जेक्टिव होना चाहिए फॉलिंग ऑब्जेक्ट से अपने आप को सुरक्षित करना, और अगर हम किसी बिल्डिंग के कोने में गए हैं तो अपने सिर को किसी चोट से बचाने के लिए इस तरह से सिर को ढक सकते हैं, ऐसे ढक सकते हैं, या अपने आप को किसी टेबल के नीचे सुरक्षित कर सकते हैं, नीचे बैठ करके सुरक्षित कर सकते हैं.
Unscientifically built high-rises, old buildings with zero safety norms. If the national capital region is ever hit by an earthquake, we're in serious trouble.
NCR is the #1 place in the entire India which has highest number of high-rise buildings, but sadly there is no rule for safety and structural audit of these buildings. Such kind of buildings which are abandoned during the construction are a threat to the residents, and the government must take lessons from what happened in Turkey. With camera person Ankit, this is Abhishek Anand reporting for India Today.